Part 1. The Arrival. The road to Greyhaven was barely a road at all. Elias Cross gripped the steering wheel tighter as his car bumped over the cracked asphalt, the tyres crunching against loose gravel and the occasional bone-white tree root that had pushed its way through the pavement. The town hadn't appeared on any modern maps. He'd only found reference to it in a forgotten newspaper clipping from 1956. A single headline had caught his eye. Greyhaven Asylum closes its doors amid scandal. For months, Elias had followed breadcrumbs like these. He wasn't a journalist anymore, not in the traditional sense, not after the incident that had left his credibility in shreds. Instead, he called himself an independent investigator, though most people simply labelled him what he had become, a scavenger of tragedies, a seeker of the grotesque. He told himself it wasn't for fame, not anymore. He did it because something about the abandoned, the forgotten, the hushed-up corners of history clawed at him. He couldn't look away. And Greyhaven was different. The asylum here wasn't simply abandoned. It was buried. A storm rolled in as he reached the town limits. The sign welcoming visitors leaned at an angle. Its paint faded until only faint letters were legible. Greyhaven. Someone had taken an axe to the wooden post, leaving gashes that resembled claw marks more than vandalism. The houses he passed were skeletal remains, windows blackened, doors ripped from hinges, roofs sagging inward, as if the buildings themselves were exhausted from decades of silence. Elias parked near what had once been a town square. A rusted fountain stood in the centre, its cherub statue missing a head. Stores lined the street, their signs dangling by a single nail. The pharmacy's shelves were visible through the shattered front glass, bottles still lined in rows but covered in a thick skin of dust. The town was empty, too empty. Even in ghost towns, Elias expected signs of vermin, birds, something living. Here, the only sound was the wind. He slung his backpack over his shoulder, checked his camera and clicked on the recorder. Greyhaven. Population 0. Approximate date of abandonment. 1957. Asylum records indicate closure following patient disappearances and unsubstantiated rumours of... He hesitated, glancing at the fountain. The cherub's missing head seemed to tilt toward him. Rumours of unethical experiments. Locals refused to discuss the asylum. Nearest neighbouring town denies Greyhaven ever existed. The asylum itself stood on the far edge of Greyhaven, up a hill where the forest clawed at the remains of an iron gate. Its silhouette was unmistakable. Spires rising against the storm clouds, windows like blind eyes. Elias walked. His boots crunched over wet leaves and broken glass, each step echoing in the emptiness. The asylum gate loomed ahead. Rust had eaten away much of the metal, but the words engraved across the arch were still visible. Greyhaven Sanatorium for the chronically ill chains dangled across the entrance. They looked heavy, but when Elias tested them, they slid apart with ease. No lock, no real barrier, almost as though the asylum wanted him inside. He raised the camera, filming as he pushed the gate open. The screech echoed through the trees like a scream. The asylum's front doors stood slightly ajar. A storm gust pushed them wider, and for a moment Elias thought he heard voices, a faint chorus of whispers drifting from within. But when he stopped and held his breath, the sound was gone. He stepped inside. The entry hall was cavernous, the ceiling lost in shadow. His flashlight beams swept across broken chandeliers and a grand staircase that split into two directions. Dust swirled in the air like falling ash. The smell hit him next. Mildew, rust, and something else. Something faintly metallic. Blood. The recorder clicked in his hand. Entry hall intact. Furniture decayed. Evidence of... The beam of his flashlight froze on the far wall. A door stood there, different from the others. Reinforced steel, its surface painted over dozens of times in thick, uneven strokes, as though someone had tried again and again to conceal what lay beneath. The paint had cracked and peeled, and Elias could see faint letters carved into the metal. Ward H. His chest tightened. He hadn't expected to find it so quickly. For weeks he'd followed rumours of a secret ward beneath Greyhaven. Official records made no mention of it, but whispers online spoke of Ward H, a place where the asylum's most dangerous patients were locked away, patients who weren't supposed to exist. The door was sealed with a rusted chain. Elias knelt, examining it. The metal crumbled slightly under his touch, leaving orange flakes on his fingers. His flashlight trembled as he shone it through a narrow crack. The darkness beyond wasn't like ordinary shadow. It seemed thicker, alive, almost pulsing. And then he heard it, breathing. Slow, deep, just on the other side. Elias's stomach turned cold. He swallowed hard, whispering into the recorder. Door marked Ward H located. Audible respiration detected from behind barrier. No visible source. The breathing grew louder, timed with his own, almost mocking. He stumbled back, but his boot landed on something that cracked beneath his weight. He froze, lowering the light. A file folder, its cover warped by water damage, edges blackened as if burned. Across the front in faded typewriter ink was a name: Cross, Elias. His breath hitched. His hands shook as he flipped it open. Inside was a single page, crisp and white. The ink disturbingly fresh. Patient admitted September 14th, 2025. Symptoms: obsession, paranoia, delusional tendencies. Believes himself to be an investigator. Prognosis: irreversible. The page ended with a signature. The ink was smudged, but the name was clear. Dr. Ashcroft. Elias's vision swam. He dropped the folder, backing away until he hit the grand staircase. His pulse thundered in his ears. How could his name already be here? How could the file be dated today? The breathing on the other side of the door deepened, shifting into something more like a growl. Then, the chain snapped. The door creaked open an inch, and the whisper that slipped through was not a voice Elias had ever heard before. But it knew his name. Part 2. The ward below. The chain lay in two rusted halves on the ground. The door marked Ward H stood ajar, its gaps spilling nothing but blackness. Elias's pulse raced so hard he felt it in his throat. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, to leave the asylum and never come back. But his hands moved almost of their own accord. He raised the camera, pressed record, and whispered, "The door to Ward H has opened on its own." Documenting entry, the words steadied him, if only slightly. As long as he was narrating, he was in control. As long as he was recording, what happened here was evidence, not madness. He pushed the door wider. The hinges shrieked like something alive being torn apart. Cold air rushed out, so sharp it burned his lungs. The smell was worse now. Old stone, rot, and a sweetness that made bile rise in his throat. The beam of his flashlight vanished into the corridor beyond, swallowed almost instantly by the dark. Elias stepped across the threshold. The floor was concrete, slick beneath his boots. Water dripped from pipes overhead, each drop echoing as though the hallway stretched on forever. The deeper he went, the more he felt the asylum shifting. The walls seemed too narrow, then too wide. Shadows bent in unnatural angles, stretching away from his light instead of toward it. Every sound was magnified, the scratch of fabric as he adjusted his backpack, the quickening rasp of his breath, the faint click of the recorder. But beneath it all, he kept hearing that steady, rhythmic breathing. Sometimes behind him, sometimes ahead, sometimes inside his own chest. He reached a junction. Two paths split, one stairwell leading down, one corridor stretching flat into the dark. He hesitated, filming both, then aimed the light downward. The stairwell was narrow, claustrophobic. The steps vanished into shadow. A painted word on the wall caught his eye, faded but legible. Ward H. Isolation. Elias swallowed hard. Isolation. The word itself carried weight. He descended. The air grew heavier with each step, as though he were moving underwater. His ears popped, and for a second he thought he heard whispering. Hundreds of voices layered atop one another, all speaking words too fast to catch. The stairwell ended at a heavy door with a round glass viewing window. The glass was smeared from the inside, handprints pressed into it, streaked downward, as though someone had clawed desperately for release. Elias lifted the camera, zooming in. His flashlight beam barely penetrated the smears, but for a split second, he swore he saw a face on the other side. Pale, hollow-eyed, grinning far too wide. Then it was gone. He took a shaky breath, speaking softly into the recorder. Ward H isolation chamber. Signs of attempted escape, possible residual hallucinations. No subjects visible. He pushed the door. It swung open with a groan. The isolation ward was lined with cells, each door a slab of steel with a small grated slot. Numbers were stamped above them, though most had rusted illegible. His light swept across one, then another. Each door bore the same smear of handprints, the same suggestion of something desperate trapped inside. Then came the sound. A low scrape, like chains dragged across the floor. Elias froze, his heart hammered. The sound came from cell 14. The slot in the door was black, but as he raised the flashlight, movement flickered within. Thin, pale fingers curled around the bars. Elias's breath caught. The fingers twitched. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, they slid back into the dark. Something moved inside. He lifted the camera, zooming. Subject located, cell 14. The words died in his throat. The figure inside stepped forward, and the light caught it. It was tall, too tall, its head nearly grazing the ceiling. Its limbs were long, impossibly thin, bones pressing against paper-white skin. A patient's gown clung to it, tattered and fused to its flesh in places. Its face was wrong. The eyes were sunken, too large in their sockets, pupils swallowing what little iris remained. The mouth opened, revealing no teeth, just a black cavern that stretched wider than any human jaw should. Elias stumbled back, the flashlight trembling. The thing didn't move, only watched him. Then the other cells began to stir. One by one, pale hands slid through grates, fingers twitching like broken marionettes. Shapes shifted in the dark behind them, hollow faces pressed to the slots, staring, watching, silent. Elias's throat tightened. Multiple subjects present, appearing non-responsive, possibly restrained. He knew they weren't restrained. He could see the way their arms reached freely through the bars, grasping at the air. The scrape came again, louder now. From behind him, he spun. At the far end of the ward, a wheelchair sat in the middle of the corridor. Its wheels turned slightly, rocking back and forth as though someone had just stood up from it. Elias raised the camera, zooming, whispering into the recorder. Unoccupied wheelchair, unexplained movement. The wheelchair rolled forward on its own. The figures in the cells twitched violently, jerking as if pulled by invisible strings. Some slammed their faces against the grates over and over, blood streaking the steel. Others clawed at their restraints until nails snapped. The wheelchair rolled closer, and Elias realized it wasn't empty. A shape sat slumped in it, human at first glance. But as it rolled closer, the light revealed its head, wrapped in gauze so thick only a slit of mouth was visible. The bandages pulsed with every breath. The figure raised one skeletal arm and pointed directly at Elias. His legs moved before his mind caught up. He bolted back toward the stairwell, his flashlight beam whipping wildly across the walls. The figures in the cells shrieked in unison, a sound like rusted metal tearing apart. The wheelchair screeched after him, rolling far too fast. He stumbled up the stairs, heart slamming against his ribs. The recorder fell from his hand, clattering down the steps, still spinning tape. But as he reached the top, the corridor was gone. The entry hall was gone. Instead, another hallway stretched out before him, identical to the one below. Same concrete walls, same dripping pipes, same row of cells. The asylum had shifted. Elias spun, but the stairwell behind him had sealed into solid wall. No door, no way back. The sound of the wheelchair echoed up from nowhere. Closer, closer. Elias backed away, his breath ragged. His flashlight beam caught a file cabinet standing in the middle of the corridor, as though it had been waiting for him. The drawer was half open. Inside was a folder. He pulled it out with trembling hands. Patient file. Cross. Elias. The page inside was longer this time, details filled in. Day 2 of observation. Subject has entered Ward H, displays heightened paranoia, fixation on documentation. Subject believes himself in control, though control has already been lost. The words swam in his vision. At the bottom, fresh ink scrawled itself before his eyes, letters forming one at a time. Next stage, integration. The wheelchair screeched louder. The breathing surrounded him. The figures in the cells whispered his name in unison. And Elias realized with bone-deep horror, the asylum wasn't just watching him, it was writing him. Part 3. Experiments in silence. The whispers didn't stop. Even when Elias pressed his hands over his ears, the sound slid through his skin and bones, vibrating in his skull. Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, all murmuring his name, some pleading, some mocking, some chanting it in a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. The corridor stretched endlessly before him, each step swallowed by silence thicker than the air itself. His flashlight beam quivered over rusted bars and smeared windows, catching glimpses of faces that weren't faces at all. Hollow sockets, wide grins, mouths too still to belong to anything alive. He had to document. He had to document. His only tether to sanity was the act of recording. He crouched, retrieved the recorder he'd dropped earlier, and pressed the button. It whirred to life, the wheels spinning. His voice came out hoarse, shaking. Subject Elias Cross. Ward H has shifted architecture. Hallways repeat themselves, possibly in a looping pattern. Multiple entities present, non-human, though formerly patients. They know my name. The whispers grew louder at the word name. He clutched the recorder tighter, forcing his voice to remain steady. Evidence suggests the asylum itself is observing me, possibly altering the environment, documenting in real time. He stopped. His own words echoed back, distorted, replayed through hidden speakers. The asylum itself is observing me. The sound came not from the recorder but from the walls. Speakers, ancient and crackling with static, embedded in the ceiling above every cell. Then another voice cut in, flat, mechanical, cold. Observation continues. Commence experiment. Silence. The whispers ceased instantly. The world plunged into absolute, suffocating quiet. Elias's ears rang, desperate for sound. He tapped the recorder, no click. He stomped his boot, no thud. He screamed, but his own voice did not reach him. The silence was alive. It pressed against his skin, burrowed into his lungs. His chest heaved, but even his breath made no sound. He staggered backward, panic clawing through him. Without sound, his thoughts spiraled too fast, too loud, screaming inside his skull with nowhere to go. The asylum was experimenting, and he was the subject. He stumbled toward a door at the end of the corridor, marked with a faded sign, Observation Room. It opened without resistance. Inside was a chamber lined with glass panels, each looking into cells on the other side. Dust-coated monitors lined the walls, some shattered, others flickering faintly with static. Thick binders lay scattered across desks, their covers labelled with dates that stretched back nearly a century. Elias's flashlight cut across one panel of glass, and his stomach turned to stone. A figure stood on the other side, facing him. Not one of the faceless patients. It was Elias, his own reflection, but wrong. The other him wasn't holding a flashlight. His eyes were wide, lips stretched into a grin that didn't belong to him. And as Elias lifted his hand, the reflection didn't move. It only tilted its head, grinning wider, as if amused. The silence deepened. His teeth ached. He staggered to the monitors, sweeping the light across them. Static hissed, but faint images pushed through. One showed the corridor he had just left, but he wasn't there. Another showed him standing in the observation room, only, in that image, something tall and thin loomed behind him. Elias spun, flashlight slashing the dark. Nothing. He looked back at the screen. The figure still stood behind him. Closer now, its head tilting, its hands reaching. The screen flickered, static surging. Then all the monitors came to life at once. They showed him, not just now, but in fragments, entering the asylum, standing at the Ward H door, holding the file with his name, screaming into silence, running through halls he hadn't yet seen, falling to his knees in rooms he hadn't yet entered. The monitors were showing him not just in the present, but in the future. The silence cracked. A voice came through the speakers again. Integration incomplete. Prepare tape. Elias's recorder clicked in his hand. The wheels spun by themselves. His voice filled the air. Words he had never spoken. Patient demonstrates willingness to continue. Patient unaware he has already been archived. Next stage, self-recognition. The reflection in the glass lifted its hand. This time, Elias did too, unable to stop himself. Their palms met against the glass. The grin spread across both faces at once. For a moment, he didn't know which side of the glass he was on. The silence broke like shattering glass. Screams erupted from every speaker, high-pitched, animalistic, raw. The glass panels vibrated, spiderweb cracks forming. His flashlight flickered, plunging the room in and out of darkness. Each flash revealed his reflection closer, grinning, eyes black. Each flicker showed the thin figure from the monitor looming at his back. He bolted for the door, slamming it open. The corridor was different again. No cells now, just endless doors, each labelled with names: Ashcroft, Delaney, Hart, Marrow, Cross. Hundreds of them. Thousands. He ran, breath ragged, every door slamming open as he passed. Inside each was a desk, a single chair, a reel-to-reel tape recorder spinning endlessly. Each tape bore a label: patient file. Some played screams, others played weeping. Some whispered prayers, some laughed, and some repeated his name. He skidded to a halt, nearly collapsing, chest heaving. The hallway stretched infinite. The asylum wasn't just holding patients, it was recording them, every voice, every thought, every breath. And Elias realized his tape was already spinning. Part 4, The Asylum Awakens. The tape spun, thousands of them, stretching endlessly in every direction. Their reels turned in perfect unison, hissing with static, whispering fragments of voices long dead or never alive at all. Elias stumbled forward, clutching the recorder to his chest like a lifeline, though he wasn't sure anymore if it was his tool or his leash. His name drifted from the nearest tape. Cross. Elias. Cross. Elias. He clamped his hands over his ears, but it didn't help. The voices didn't enter through sound. They slid straight into his bones. Then, without warning, the corridor shifted. Every tape stopped. Every reel froze. Silence. The fluorescent lights overhead, lights that shouldn't have been working, flickered, then roared to life with a harsh electric buzz. For the first time, Ward H was fully illuminated, and Elias wished it hadn't been. The corridor wasn't endless anymore. It was vast, cathedral-like. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, supported by rusting beams wrapped in wires and pulsing tubes. Desks were scattered like gravestones across the floor, each with a patient tape still spinning lazily, their labels glowing faintly with phosphorescent ink. The walls weren't walls anymore, but rows upon rows of observation windows, black with soot, behind which shadows shifted. Watching. The asylum had woken up. The PA system screeched, then crackled with a voice. Flat, genderless, mechanical. Observation resuming. Patient Cross, Elias. Integration at 42%. Proceeding with stage 2. Elias's knees nearly buckled. He clutched the edge of a desk, whispering, "No, I'm not a patient. I'm not." But the lights overhead buzzed, dimmed, then flared brighter, as if in answer. The air shifted. Furniture scraped across the floor by itself, forming pathways like veins. Desks slid aside, cabinets turned, chairs skittered like insects until the layout of the chamber had changed entirely. What had been chaos was now order, rows forming aisles, aisles forming a path that led to a door. It stood tall at the far end, sealed with bolts thicker than Elias's wrist. Across its surface was the same painted word as before. Integration. The PA crackled again. Patient to proceed. Non-compliance will result in erasure. As if to punctuate the threat, the tapes around him began to unwind. The reels spun violently, spilling ribbons of tape across the floor. They coiled like snakes, slithering toward him, hissing with distorted voices. He backed away, but the tape wrapped around his ankles, sticky and cold, whispering in tongues he didn't understand. He ripped free, heart pounding, and stumbled down the newly formed path. The door loomed closer with every desperate step. He reached it. His flashlight beam shook over the bolts. They weren't rusted. They were fresh, gleaming, as though someone had sealed it only hours ago. He pushed. It didn't budge. The recorder clicked in his hand. His own voice spoke from it. Push harder. Elias's blood froze. That wasn't his voice recorded earlier. That was him, now, speaking words he hadn't spoken yet. He shoved. The bolts screeched, one by one, snapping loose. The door swung open. Beyond was a stairwell. But not like the others. This one spiraled downward, wide and clean, lit by overhead lamps that glowed a sterile white. It didn't look abandoned at all. It looked maintained, lived in. He descended, step after step, the recorder still whirring in his grip. Halfway down, the lights above him shut off, not flickered, not dimmed, snapped off, and the lights below him turned on. Step by step, The stairwell forced him downward, sealing the way back with darkness. By the time he reached the bottom, he was shaking with exhaustion. The stairwell opened into a chamber unlike anything he'd seen above. Surgical lamps hung from the ceiling. Tables lined the walls, each fitted with restraints. Machines sat in rows, their panels blinking faintly, dials twitching though no power source was visible. Cables slithered across the floor, plugging into outlets that vanished into the walls like veins into flesh. In the center of the chamber stood a single chair, high-backed, strapped, waiting. The PA system hummed. Stage 2. Memory extraction. Elias staggered backward, his flashlight beam darting over the machinery. Patient charts hung from clipboards. He grabbed one, flipping through pages with shaking fingers. They weren't medical notes. They were transcripts, words, sentences, entire monologues typed neatly, labeled with names and dates. Every file was a life, a memory, a story. He dropped the chart. His stomach lurched. The asylum wasn't treating patients. It was recording them, erasing who they were and storing them as data. His light swept the far wall. There, observation windows. But these weren't black with soot. They were clear, and behind them stood people. Dozens of them, watching him. They didn't move, didn't blink. Their faces were pale, waxy, their eyes blank. Some pressed their hands to the glass. Others leaned forward, mouths opening soundlessly. Their movements were stiff, puppet-like, and Elias realized with horror that they weren't people. They were patients, archived, frozen in endless observation, stuck between being and not being. His knees buckled. He whispered into the recorder, barely able to breathe. Ward H is not an asylum. It's an archive. It keeps them, all of them, forever. The PA answered, cold and final. Correction. Ward H is the archive, and now it keeps you. The lights flared. The restraints on the central chair snapped open, as if inviting him. Elias backed away, shaking his head. No, I'm not sitting. I'm not. The tapes around the room began to unwind again. Ribbons of black magnetic film whipped through the air like tendrils, slapping against his arms, his throat, his face. They yanked him forward, pulling him toward the chair. He screamed, tearing at them, but more lashed around his wrists, his chest, his ankles. He hit the chair hard, the restraints snapping closed around him instantly. Cold metal bit into his skin. The surgical lamps roared to life above him, blinding. The PA's voice cut through the static. Stage 2 commencing. Patient Elias Cross. Memory extraction in progress. The machines around him whirred, their dials spinning. A low hum filled the chamber. Elias thrashed, but the restraints held. His vision swam, colors blurring. Images flickered across the observation windows. Scenes from his past. His childhood bedroom. His university desk. The newsroom where he once worked. His failure. His disgrace. His decision to hunt horrors instead of truth. Every memory bled from his mind and onto the glass, projected like film reels. The observers leaned closer, feeding on them silently. No. Stop! Elias screamed, tears stinging his eyes. Those are mine! But the machines kept humming. The lights kept burning. The asylum didn't care. The asylum was awake, and Elias Cross was its newest file. Part 5. Descent. The restraints didn't let go. For what felt like hours, Elias hung in the chair, wrists and ankles clamped in freezing steel. His mind pulsed with a hollow ache, as though parts of it had already been carved away. The lamps above flickered in rhythm with the machines, each burst of light dragging another fragment of memory into the glass. At first, the windows had shown his past, his childhood, his career, his failures. But now they began to twist, distorting the truth. He saw himself as a boy, not running through his backyard, but pacing padded floors, hands bound in canvas sleeves. He saw himself at the university, not scribbling in lecture notes, but screaming into an empty recorder while men in white coats watched from behind glass. He saw himself disgraced, not for sloppy journalism, but for violence, frenzied, animalistic, blood on his hands. The asylum wasn't just taking his memories, it was rewriting them. The PA system buzzed. Integration. 64%. Alignment required, Elias thrashed against the restraints. That's not me! That's not me! The recorder in his pocket clicked. His own voice whispered back. Not yet. The restraints snapped open. Elias tumbled to the floor, coughing, shoving the slick ribbons of tape away from his face. The machines wound down, their hum fading into silence. The observation windows went dark, erasing the images of his life, or whatever the asylum had painted over them. He staggered upright, swaying, his breath ragged. He expected more tape to lash at him, more restraints to tighten, more commands from the PA. But none came. Instead, the far wall of the chamber rumbled. A seam appeared, thin as a scar. It split open slowly, groaning, until another stairwell revealed itself. This one was narrower, darker. No lights burned inside it. The air that spilled out was wet, rotting, and beneath the stink of mildew and rust, Elias caught something worse. Meat. The recorder clicked again. Down, always down. He didn't want to obey, but the path was set, and he knew the asylum would give him no choice. He stepped into the stairwell. The walls closed behind him with a hiss, sealing him in darkness. The descent lasted forever. His flashlight beam shook, casting dizzying shadows across the spiral walls. Water dripped constantly, tapping against his shoulders, matting his hair. The deeper he went, the louder the sound grew. Not a drip anymore, but a trickle. Then a stream, then a rushing flood muffled by concrete. Somewhere below, water raged. Halfway down, he heard footsteps. Not echoes, not his own. Footsteps rising. He froze, light darting down the stairwell. The steps curved away into pitch, nothing visible. But the sound was clear. One step, then another. Slow, heavy. Someone, or something, was climbing toward him. Elias's throat tightened. He killed the flashlight, plunging himself into darkness. The steps kept coming, slow and deliberate, until they were just below the curve. Then they stopped. Silence. Elias didn't breathe. Sweat rolled down his spine. The recorder clicked in his pocket. Keep moving. The steps exploded upward. Elias bolted down the stairwell, switching the flashlight back on. Shadows whipped across the walls as he bounded down 2, 3 steps at a time. The thing below gave chase, its footsteps pounding against the concrete, faster, hungrier. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He felt it in the air, the weight of something massive, the breath of something that had never belonged in human lungs. The stairwell ended suddenly, spitting him into another chamber. This one was flooded. The water stretched wall to wall, black and slick, rippling under the beam of his flashlight. Rusted catwalks hung overhead, but most had collapsed, their ladders dangling uselessly into the water. The ceiling was lost in darkness, and on the far side of the chamber, another door. The only way across was through the water. Behind him, the stairwell trembled. The thing was close. Elias splashed into the water. It came up to his knees, then his waist, icy cold. The stink of rot nearly gagged him. He forced himself forward, flashlight clenched between his teeth, recorder still running in his hand. Something brushed against his leg. He froze. Another brush, then another. The water rippled. Shapes moved beneath the surface. He kicked forward, wading as fast as he could, teeth chattering around the flashlight. The door was halfway across, maybe less. If he could just... Hands shot up from the water. Grey, swollen, skin sloughing off in sheets. Dozens of them. They grabbed his legs, his arms, dragging him down. Faces broke the surface, half rotted. Eyes pale and clouded, mouths filled with black water. They weren't alive. They weren't dead. They were the patients. Their voices bubbled from the water, 100 whispers in unison. Stay. Elias thrashed, kicking, clawing. His flashlight tumbled into the water, beam vanishing in the murk. Cold fingers wrapped around his throat, pulling him under. He inhaled water, gagging, choking, thrashing blindly. The recorder clicked in his hand. Don't drown. Something inside him surged. He rammed his knee upward, wrenching free from the hands, and clawed his way toward the surface. He broke through, coughing, spitting water, dragging himself forward in a frenzy. The door loomed closer. Behind him, the stairwell erupted. The thing emerged. It wasn't a patient. It wasn't a doctor. It wasn't human at all. It was tall, hunched, its head nearly scraping the ceiling. Its body was stitched together from dozens of torsos, arms, legs, faces. They twitched, muttering incoherently, while its central face, if it could be called that, stretched in a permanent scream. Its arms were long, dragging through the water, each hand ending in too many fingers. The patients in the water didn't fight it. They worshipped it. Elias's chest nearly split with terror. He stumbled toward the door, slamming against it with all his weight. It groaned open, just enough for him to squeeze through. He slammed it shut behind him, collapsing on the floor. The pounding footsteps stopped. Silence. Only the recorder clicked. Lower still. The corridor beyond was narrow, dripping with condensation. Pipes lined the walls, hissing faintly. The air was hotter here, damp and suffocating. Elias staggered forward, coughing water, clutching his recorder like a weapon. He didn't know how much farther down the asylum went. He only knew one thing. It wasn't done with him, and he wasn't done with it. Part 6. The core. The corridor narrowed as Elias pressed deeper, its walls sweating with condensation, pipes rattling like bones. The heat grew suffocating, the air thick and damp, clogging his lungs. His clothes clung to him, soaked from the flooded chamber, and every step squelched against the floor. He followed the pipes. They twisted along the walls, vanishing into shadow, pulsing faintly as though liquid or blood ran through them. Each junction hummed with power. The asylum wasn't dead. It wasn't abandoned. It was alive, pumping, breathing. The recorder clicked in his hand. You're almost there. His stomach turned. Almost where? But it didn't answer. The corridor opened into a massive chasm. Elias stopped dead, his flashlight beam stretching into nothingness. A bottomless pit yawned beneath him, filled with steam rising in choking clouds. The pipes he'd been following extended across the abyss, merging into a web of metal scaffolding that spanned the void like veins feeding a heart. And there, suspended in the center, pulsed the core. It was vast, spherical, constructed from rusted steel and meat, wrapped in coils of wire and looping spools of magnetic tape. Its surface bulged in places, skin stretched thin over machinery, faces pressing outward before vanishing again. Eyes opened, rolled, and blinked, then melted back into the mass. Voices murmured constantly, thousands at once, overlapping in a deafening whisper. The asylum's brain, the asylum's heart, the asylum itself. Elias dropped to his knees, his flashlight trembling in his grip. He whispered hoarsely, "God. No, this isn't real." The PA system screeched, its voice vibrating through the metal floor beneath him. "Patient Cross, Elias. Integration at 79%. Proceed with alignment." The core pulsed. A deep, thunderous beat rolled through the chamber, shaking the scaffolding. The voices rose in unison, chanting fragments of memory, of prayers, of screams. Elias clutched his recorder. "I'm not part of this. I'm not your patient." But even as he said it, he felt the truth gnawing at him. The asylum wasn't wrong. Every corridor had been built for him. Every tape whispered his name. Every memory it showed him wasn't just stolen. It was rewritten, and now it was rewriting him. The scaffolding extended toward him, forming a bridge of metal and flesh across the abyss. It pulsed like a living tongue, inviting him forward. The recorder clicked. "Go. See it." He shook his head violently. "No. No, I'm not." The floor behind him cracked. Pipes burst, hissing steam, flooding the corridor. The way back was gone. The only way forward was across. Elias staggered onto the bridge, every step sinking slightly into the fleshy metal. Veins throbbed beneath his boots. Whispers grew louder, swirling inside his skull. His flashlight beam jittered over the surface of the core as he drew closer. The faces pressing against its skin were clearer now. Some he recognized, his parents, professors, colleagues, people he'd known in passing. Others were strangers. Their mouths opened in silent screams, their eyes wide with eternal terror. And then he saw his own. His face pressed outward from the core, lips trembling, whispering something he couldn't hear. Elias stumbled back, nearly pitching into the abyss. The PA boomed. Final stage. Synchronization. Patient Elias Cross. Sit. A chair erupted from the bridge ahead of him, grown from the flesh metal, identical to the one in the extraction chamber. Its restraints snapped open with a metallic hiss, waiting. Elias shook his head, backing away, tears burning in his eyes. No. You won't have me. You can't. The core pulsed harder. The scaffolding quaked. The bridge stretched, extending the chair closer. And then, from within the whispers, he heard something different. Not commands, not memories. A voice, a woman's voice. Elias. Help me. He froze. The face on the core shifted. It wasn't his anymore. It was hers. Anna, the missing researcher, the woman whose notes he'd followed into this nightmare. Her face pressed outward, eyes wide with desperation. It's eating us, she whispered. Don't let it. Don't let it finish. The PA shrieked, drowning her out. Do not resist. Integration ensures survival. Elias's mind reeled. Anna was alive, trapped, but alive. If she was still conscious inside the core, maybe others were too. Maybe everyone the asylum had ever taken was still in there, screaming for release. And maybe he could burn it. The recorder clicked. Do it. Elias gripped it tightly. His flashlight beam swept the bridge, the core, the veins of tape and wire. If this was alive, then it could die. The asylum knew his thoughts. The scaffolding quaked violently, nearly throwing him into the abyss. The core's voices roared in a deafening chorus. Resistance. Erasure. The chair slid closer. The restraints opened wider. Elias's heart pounded. He had a choice. Submit and be absorbed, or defy the asylum and destroy everything. He raised the recorder to his mouth, whispering into it with shaking breath. Ward H. I will burn you to the ground, the core screamed. The chamber shook. Pipes burst overhead, spraying boiling steam. Faces on the core melted, twisted, reformed. The scaffolding cracked beneath him, and the recorder in his hand glowed faintly. Tape reels spinning faster than physics should allow. For the first time, the asylum wasn't controlling it. He was. Part 7. Collapse. The recorder spun furiously in Elias's grip. Reels whirring, tape glowing with a pale, unnatural light. The core screamed in 1,000 voices at once, shaking the entire chamber, but for the first time, Elias felt power flowing in the other direction. Out of the recorder and into him. He could fight. The scaffolding lurched, trying to throw him toward the waiting chair, but he dug his boots into the fleshy metal. The recorder clicked, then spoke, not in his voice, not in the asylum's, but Anna's. Burn it, Elias. Do it now. His flashlight beam swept the chamber wildly. Pipes fed into the core from every direction. Arteries carrying power, carrying blood, carrying souls. If he could break them, the whole thing might collapse. The PA system howled. Integration critical. Erase subject Cross immediately. The bridge split open. From its seams, shapes emerged. Patients, half-formed, dripping with fluid, staggering forward like puppets yanked on strings. Their faces were familiar. People he'd seen in the asylum's records, in the observation glass, and even in the core itself. Their eyes were blank, their mouths whispering in static. Elias clutched the recorder. You're not real. You're echoes. But they came anyway. Dozens of them. He raised the recorder, pressing the red button. The reels screeched, and his voice thundered back at them. His own voice, from the countless times he'd documented horrors. Stay back. Stay back. The sound blasted the patients like a shockwave. Their bodies convulsed, tape spooling out of their mouths, before they collapsed into heaps of static and smoke. Elias blinked, stunned. The recorder wasn't just a weapon. It was rewriting reality. The core roared, every face on its surface contorting in rage. Erase him! The bridge cracked. More figures erupted, crawling from the scaffolding itself. Grotesque fusions of metal and flesh, with mouths where their chests should be, arms sprouting from spines. They lurched toward him, shrieking in stolen voices. Elias backed toward the edge of the abyss. Steam scalded his skin. The floor trembled under his boots, but he didn't falter. He raised the recorder again, slammed the red button, and screamed into it with every shred of his soul. Ward H. Burn! The recorder shrieked. Its reels spun so fast they blurred into light. The core convulsed, bursting pipes one after another. Steam blasted across the chamber, spraying boiling water. The faces on its surface melted, reformed, melted again, screaming as one. The scaffolding collapsed beneath Elias's feet. He fell, plunging into the abyss. But the recorder caught him. He didn't hit metal. He didn't hit water. He hit memory. He was standing in a hallway, but not Ward H, his old newsroom. The recorder still spun in his hand. The fluorescent lights buzzed above him, the smell of burnt coffee in the air. His desk sat ahead, piled with unfinished notes, unfiled stories. His old life. For a heartbeat, he thought the asylum had given it back. Then the walls bled. Tape unfurled from the ceiling, wrapping around the desks, the chairs, the papers. His colleagues turned their heads toward him, their eyes pale, their mouths whispering static. Integration at 98%. No, Elias gasped, backing away. No, I destroyed you, the recorder clicked. His own voice answered, finish it. The newsroom peeled away, falling into darkness. He was back in the chamber, clinging to a fragment of collapsing scaffolding. The core thrashed violently, splitting open down the middle. Inside, he saw them, all the patients, all the lives, their faces screaming from within the wires and flesh. And Anna, her face shone brightest. Her eyes locked on his. Don't let it win. Elias raised the recorder one final time. The red button glowed like fire beneath his thumb. He didn't hesitate. He pressed it and screamed, erase. The core detonated. Light consumed everything. When Elias opened his eyes, he was lying on the ground outside. The asylum loomed behind him, or what was left of it. Ward H was collapsing, its walls folding inward, windows shattering, tape and wires snapping like tendons. A deep roar echoed through the night as the building sank into the earth, swallowed whole. The recorder lay beside him, silent. Its reels melted. Elias staggered to his feet, choking on dust and smoke. The asylum was gone, but the voices weren't. They whispered faintly in the back of his skull, fragments of memory not his own. Screams, prayers, songs. Anna's voice, fading slowly into silence. And then nothing. Only his breath. Only the wind. Elias stumbled away from the crater where Ward H had stood, the dawn breaking faintly on the horizon. He was alive, but he wasn't free. Because as the light touched the recorder's ruined frame, he saw it, the reels turning again, slowly, whispering, integration complete.